Hello. You are in day 21 and we're going to learn very important topic in this course, M unit. Testing is really important. We'll understand how to actually write test cases using M unit. So these are the topics we are going to discuss in today's lecture. So let us get started. In this lecture, we are going to understand about testing framework of Mule, M unit. In earlier versions of Mule, we used to write test cases using JUnit. So a Mule developer had to write test cases in Java. But now we can write test cases just like how we write our flows using MUnit. I hope all of you know the advantages of testing. So I am not going to waste time on discussing about advantages and disadvantages of testing. So let us jump into a concept directly. Using MUnit, we can write unit test cases and functional test cases. So for performance testing, we cannot use MUnit. So let us get started with a use case. So let me tell you the use case which I am going to use for testing. In this application which I have imported, I have one XML with three flows: main flow, products by ID flow, products by brand flow. Let me explain you. This HTTP listener is listening on slash products. Whenever we get a request, choice router has three routes. First route will be executed when there is a query parameter ID. So what is there inside it? There is set variable which is retrieving query parameter ID and creating a variable product ID. Then calling products by ID flow. Here I am calling database select, firing a select query on product table, retrieving a product by ID, and the value of ID I am setting using variable product ID. Then I am using transform message to transform the payload. Then here products by brand, it will query products table based on brand. So the second route will be actually invoked whenever there is a query parameter brand. Second route is setting the variable brand by retrieving the value from query parameters and then calling the products by brand flow. This is retrieving products by brand from database and converting to JSON, returning back. So let me start this application and make requests manually to see what are the expected outputs. Then we are going to write MUnit test cases. Okay, let it start. The application got deployed. Let me give a request to localhost 8081 slash products. I'm passing query parameter ID equals to 1. Okay. So I am getting product with ID 1. Actually, in my database, I have 6 products from product ID 1 to 6 and various brands. Okay. Now let me make a request for brand by passing query parameter brand is equals to apple. See, I got how many products? Two products. So how many apple products are there? There are two apple products. So I got an array of two apple products. Okay. Now I want to write test cases for testing this main flow. How to write? Very simple. What we have to do is, if I want to write test cases for this flow, I have to click on top, MUnit, create blank test for this flow. This is a test suite or test suite, whatever we call. A test suite, as you might be knowing, is nothing but a combination of multiple cases. One suite can contain multiple cases. So here one test case is created. It is represented like this. If you see the XML, um, it has munit colon test. This is one case. Okay. In every test case, there are three parts: behavior, execution, validation. So in the execution part, you can see there is a flow reference calling reference to a flow under test. We want to test the main flow. So normally in while running the application, if I give a HTTP request, this inbound endpoint or the message source is responsible for taking the protocol specific message and create a mule event. But whenever we are using flow reference to refer to a flow, the source will be ignored. Control will come directly to the first component. So here we are using flow reference to refer to main flow. The control will come to choice. But who will create a mule event in this case? So here, before calling main flow or the flow to test, we have to create an event. So you can see in Mule palette, there are two modules automatically added whenever we generated a test suite. These two are automatically added. So here in munit module, there is set event. So I will drag and drop set event and will try to set the event. Okay, again, drag and drop. Okay. So normally a mule event contains what all? Mule event contains payload, attributes, variables, error if there is an exception. So here in the set event, whatever I want to set as a payload, I can write it as an expression. Whatever I want to write attributes, I can set it here. Error object in case of an exception or variables. In this case, actually what is requested? What is required? Query parameters. We are not bothered about what is a payload. Payload I don't want to set, but I want to set an attribute called as query params, and inside it I want id. Id is equals to, let's say, 1. Okay. So I want to test this scenario. I want to make sure that I will get this as response. So I will set attributes. I will write it as an expression. Inside attributes, I want query params. There can be multiple query parameters. The value should be an object. ID I am giving as 1. So this is the expression I am setting inside attributes, query params, and inside query params, ID1. Okay, the flow reference will be invoked. And whatever response I'm expecting, I have to do such assertions. So in the validation part, I have to use assertions. You can see in munit tools, there are three types of assert operations. The first one I will take, assert equals. This is the simplest one to assert if the actual and expected value are same. So I want to assert that payload, this is the entire payload, right? Payload.name is this one, a simple assertion. So I want to write actual payload dot name, and the expected value I want it to be this one. If the expected value and actual value are not as expected, the assertion will throw an error, test case will fail. What is the message I want? I will write name is not as expected. Okay. Now I have written a simple test case where I've created a event invoking the flow and asserting a simple response. Let us first run it. I will show you various other options slowly. I'll right click here and select run munit suite. Actually, we don't need to run the application whenever you are running the test case. I stopped the application. Again, I am running munit suite. So let it start. Yes, the test case is starting. Here under munit tab, you can see the result. Let us wait. Here there is only one case under it. It will take some time. And we should see that the test case passed. I should see green here. Yes, green. So that means test case passed. I want it to fail manually. So just I will assert that I'm expecting something else. So I change the expected value. Now I will run the suite. Let us see. Okay. It is starting. It should fail. And I want you to see the error as well. Okay, I'll maximize this window. See, there is a failure. And if I click on this one, here under munit errors, I can see assertion error. This is the message, whatever I wrote in my assert. It is saying expected HP Pavilion laptop 11, but the actual one is this one. So I made my test case to fail. So I will change it. So whenever you want to assert from actual expression and expected expression, the simplest thing is to use equals. But you might want to write some more assertions just other than equals. So in such case, let me show you how I can use assert that. Assert that internally matches an expression with matches. Actually, there is a module called as munit tools, which has lot of functions which are returning some matches. Based on the matches, the assert that will actually validate the result. So let us go to documentation. I'll open my browser and Google for assert that munit. So here I'm going to documentation of Mulesoft. Let us see. Here is a documentation about assert that. So here it is saying assert that processor uses a set of data view functions called munit matchers to define assertion conditions. What all are the various matches? Here they have classified the matchers into various types, core types. If you see core matchers, there is a matcher function called as null value. So if you want to assert that payload is null value, you can write munit munit tools colon null value. This will assert the payload is a null value. This function returns a matcher. Null value returns a matcher object. So actually, let us control click on it. You can see I am control clicking on not null value here. This is a function. It returns an object of type matcher. Okay. Matcher contains some properties like type and expected. We don't need to worry about it. So you need to understand that these functions return an object of matcher based on which the assert that will take a decision whether validation is successful or not. So if you want to assert payload is null value, you can use like this. If you assert that payload is not null value, here is the one. Suppose if you want to assert that the payload is with a media type. Suppose the media type of payload is text/XML. If you want to assert that, you can use a function with media type. Similarly, if you want to assert about encoding, you can use munit : with encoding. Suppose if you want to make sure that two conditions are satisfied, here it is very important. See, there is a function called as both, which will take two matcher objects, and these two matches should say that validation is successful. Suppose if you want to assert that payload is both not null value and equal to example. See, both is taking two matches. This will return one matcher object as we understood, not null and also equal to. So if you want two matcher conditions to be satisfied, then you can use munit : both. Or see here there is one more munit tools : either. Suppose you want to make sure that either of these two conditions are satisfied. Either payload is not a null value, is a null value, or equal to 0. Then suppose if you want to assert that payload is not something, not equals to 0, see, payload is not 0. Or you can also write like this. Suppose if you want to do some assertions on an array, there is any of function. munit tools : any of. This takes array of matches. See, the argument of any of is an array. You can pass n number of arguments which will return matches. So here any of is taking an array of size 3. See, if you want to assert that only two conditions are satisfied, then you could have gone for both. It takes only two matches. And if you want to make sure that only either of two conditions is satisfied, you can use either. But any of will make sure that any one of the assertion in this array is true. Or suppose if you want to make sure that multiple conditions are satisfied, multiple matches are satisfied, then you can use all of. All of function takes an array of matches. So you can pass multiple matches. It will make sure that all of these matches are validated. So that's about core matches. And string matches. There are a lot of string related functions. If you want to assert that payload contains a string, if your payload is a string, and if you want to assert that payload contains a particular string, this is the one. If you want to assert that a payload starts with, you can use starts with. There is a function ends with. If you want to assert that payload is an empty string, this is the function. If you want to assert that payload is either empty or null string, this is the one. Equals to ignoring case. If you want to compare payload by ignoring case, equals to ignoring white space, right? So like that, there are a lot of functions. By seeing the name, you can understand. So you have to actually start writing test cases, and once you start using all of this, you will get confidence. Let me again go to comparable matches. Here, there are matches to compare. suppose if you want to compare that payload is greater than something. In this case, payload is expected to be a date, and we are comparing two dates by using greater than. You can also compare based on numbers as well. Here is an example where we are asserting that payload is greater than 20. You have other methods like greater than or equal to, less than, less than or equals to. I hope I need not explain all this. Now coming to IEEE, if you want to write assertions on arrays, then here are the IEEE functions, IEEE matcher functions. Okay, you can see every item. Suppose if payload is an array and you want to make sure that every element in the item is not a null value. So this matcher will be executed, will be applied on every item. If every item is satisfying this condition, then only the assertion will be successful. Similarly, has item. If you want to make sure that if payload is an array and the array has some item like this is a way you can use has item. Has size checks the size of the array. If you want to make sure that the array size is, let's say, greater than 2, you can do like this. So like that, there are a lot of functions which you can apply on IEEE objects. That means arrays or so, right? So if you want to use functions belonging to Munit tools module, then you can use assert that. There is one more way to write assertions by using something called as assert expression. Now I'll write assert that here payload is not null value, or I will say payload dot name equals, I want to check if it is equals to, ignoring case I can use. What is the payload name expected? This is the one. If I pass id equals to 1, so I'm asserting that payload dot name is this one. Okay. Now let us see assert expression. Suppose if you want to write a big expression, then you can use assert expression. So actually there's a module called as dw colon colon test colon asserts, in which there are a lot of functions. So if you want to use all the functions in this and write expressions, then we can use assert expression. Let us go to documentation. Here in the document, here we have assert expression document. There is a data view assertions library. So in this library, dw colon colon tests colon colon asserts, we can use functions. So this module contains the set of core matches. Suppose if you want to assert payload must is a function, and second argument is a matcher. There's a function called as b object. So if you want to make sure that payload must be object, you can use like this. See, there are various functions. Suppose if you want to work with multiple matches. Suppose if you want to make sure that payload must be any of the assertions, must be object or string, then you can use any of function. See, very simple. Only thing is you need to start using them. If you start using them, you will get confidence. B array, let us see, B array function. This is return type of all these functions are matches. Okay. B array returns a match. So if you want to assert, if you want to assert that payload must be array, see, we can use B array. Payload must be blank. Be blank returns a matcher. It will make sure that the payload must be blank. Again, we have multiple methods like payload must be boolean, payload must be empty array, payload must be greater than some value, be lower than, be null, be number. You want to assert that payload must be a number, be an object, be any one of, be one of. Suppose you want to make sure that payload must be one of the elements in this array, be one of, be string. Lot of such methods are there. Actually, I recommend you to go to this documentation, see examples of all these matches, and if you start applying on demand, then you will get confidence. So, actually, my personal recommendation is I'll always use assert expression. It has a lot of good functions for various use cases. Mostly assert expression. If you can master how you can use this must function with various matches given here in this, then you can write various scenarios. Okay, I want you to actually go through this documentation and practice it. So I want to assert that payload dot name must must be, you can say, be equal, so must equal to, I can write whatever, what is the name expected, HP Pavilion laptop. Okay, let me run this suite, and I should make sure that all the three assertions are successful, and I will get a green bar. Let us see. Okay, I can see that the test case passed. That means I wrote actually three things for same condition. I'm asserting payload.name is this one here. Using assert that also I did the same. Payload.name, I am asserting that it is equal to this one. And using assert expression also I'm doing same. Same thing can be achieved. But suppose if I want to assert that payload is this entire JSON, what I can do is simply very convenient. Here I can write payload must equal to, I'll paste this JSON. Simple. If I click on this show graphical view, here is a complex expression. Here I want to assert that payload must equal to this JSON, this object. So I'll run this test and check. It should succeed. Let us wait. Yes, I can see that the test case is successful. I got green. So in this lecture, you understood very basics of MUnit. In next lecture, we'll see few more features of MUnit. Okay, we came to the end of this. So what you can do is now, you can go to this folder in my GitHub, day 1 and then day 22 MUnit. Here there's a document, MUnit basics. Open this and follow step 1 here. Uh, step, yeah, don't go to step 2, complete up to step 1, don't go to this one. So in the next video we're going to see about step 2. That's all. Make sure that you do this exercise up to this point, then only go to next video. See you next lecture.